You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for September 14th. Live. Well, here we are up with another Tropical Weather Bulletin being live tonight. Of course, that is primarily because of Tropical Storm Nicholas, which is set to make landfall tonight in the state of Texas. Chanthu is a stalling tropical storm that is weakening, and Bob 03 has become a remnant low over India. 67 storms have formed so far this season worldwide. It's day 106 of Atlantic hurricane season. Nicholas is an upper-end tropical storm set to make landfall soon. There's also Invest 95L with an 80% chance of formation, and another AOI that is going to have a potential at forming east of the Bahamas. It's day 122 of Eastern Pacific hurricane season. There's nothing active, or at least if there is anything, it's a 97E, which is at most a 10% chance of development at this point. Really, its chances are just looking completely gone for that one. In the Western Pacific, there is Chanthu, a tropical storm, and we also have a new area of interest that is to the eastern of the Philippines. We could be seeing a system develop there in the next few days, all depending on what happens, of course, with that one. In the North Indian Ocean, we're looking at the remnants of what was once Bob 03 that has been moving slowly inland and pretty much is completely dissipated, or well, almost dissipated at this point. Will likely be off our radar by tomorrow evening. With that said, here's our Atlantic satellite. You can clearly make out Nicholas, which has been very odd given the fact it has center relocated 3 times alone today in general, so definitely not something you see there. You can also see 95L, which was merging up the coast of Africa and is now starting to get itself ready to go. In the Eastern Pacific, you can see what has been 97E looking more and more disorganized, and consider the fact that the conditions look only worse from here, any chance of it developing is looking completely doubtful at this point. And after that, there's really going to be nothing that forms afterwards. In the Western Pacific, you can quite clearly make out Chanthu, which has thankfully stayed enough off the coast that we aren't seeing impacts that we could have seen associated with the storm. Regardless, it's still bringing heavy rain across portions of China, South Korea, and Japan. And of course, you can't exactly see that area of interest that we'll be monitoring in the next few days ahead either. Moving on over to the North Indian Ocean satellite imagery. It's a little bit broken considering the fact it's not loading up all the frames here, but you can see that the depression that we had make its way inland and pretty much not look as good as it was, but other than that, it's still the normal what we've been seeing there. Here's the zoomed in imagery on Nicholas, which has been impacting Texas and southwestern Louisiana. 4 to 6 inches of rain are widespread pretty much across the area. Some areas could be seeing more, 6 to 10, even 10 to 15 in some local spots. Here are the sea surface temperatures for the Eastern Pacific. You can see that the temperatures are around 27 to 29 degrees throughout the basin. Of course, the 29s are primarily confined to the eastern part of the basin at this point. In the Gulf of Mexico, those temperatures are around 30 degrees Celsius, although you can still see the influence of Ida. You can also see the influence of Larry when you look at the overall track there, with the sea surface temperatures really showing what track it took. Other than that, the rest of the Atlantic is around 28 to 29 degrees Celsius, especially near the Bahamas. In the North Indian Ocean, we're looking at temperatures around 28 to 30 degrees Celsius here, specifically in the Bay of Bengal. As you head into the Arabian Sea, those temperatures start out at 28, but drop gradually as you head westwards. And in the Western Pacific, the temperatures are around 29 to 30 degrees Celsius, although those are mainly confined to the Philippine Sea and near the equator. The Southern Hemisphere, of course, still looking marginally warm, around 26 or lower. So, with that spiel said, that brings us to the sea surface temperature anomalies. That is looking to be pretty much the same as last night. Western Pacific looking above average throughout the entire basin. The Atlantic above average except for where Ida and Larry had tracked over. In Eastern Pacific, it is still looking pretty spotty. I guess if you were to average things out, it would pretty much be equal. So with that, that pretty much takes us to the live portion of the Tropical Weather Bulletin. Of course, the main discussion feature, now that we are now down to code yellow and take us for only this system and this system only, Nicholas is going to be the one that takes the brunt of the coverage as it nears landfall. Of course, we will be discussing Chanthu a little bit as well, and we will be going over models, of course. So, joining me tonight, we have an extraordinarily small team with us, and by team, I mean duo. The only person joining me tonight would be Samuel, who, of course, is also in Maryland here. So, pretty much the TWB is dominated by Marylanders tonight. Samuel, how are you doing, and what are your thoughts on Nicholas at the moment?
I'm doing alright. My thoughts on the system so far, it's still undecided as I don't have enough information. I'm looking at the model still.
Well, just to give an idea of what we're looking at, Nicholas is up to 70 miles an hour with a pressure of 988 millibars as of the intermediate advisory from 8 o'clock. I will go over this latest information real quick. Once I get... Well, it would help if I was on the right tab and not the National Hurricane Center related graphics for the Western Pacific. But here we are. This is the code. 70 miles an hour. It's moving north-northeast at about 12 miles an hour. Tropical storm warnings remain in place across portions of Texas and, of course, up to the state border with Louisiana there. And it will be making landfall quite soon, it seems, at its current rate. Looking at its rainfall potential, we're looking at pretty much a good area that could be seeing 4 to 6, up to 6 to 10 inches of rain possible. Houston, 4 to 6 more to go. Lake Charles, New Orleans, 4 to 6 more inches of rain. Jackson, Mississippi, 2 to 3. And then, of course, as you head further eastwards, those chances decrease. In terms of flash flooding, areas south and southwest of Houston are under a high risk for excessive rainfall that could lead to flash flooding. And then with the moderate risk, that's a 20% risk of seeing flooding. That extends all the way from parts of southern Houston going into Lake Charles, New Orleans, and practically the entire southern half of Louisiana in general, and most of southwestern Mississippi. A slight risk going all the way from the central Texas, or central southeastern Texas there. Kind of hard to make out the cities with the tight gradients there. But as you head into Jackson, Mississippi, that is where they go. West of Mobile. And then, of course, Mobile itself is under a marginal risk. So that is what we're looking at with that. Going even further slightly, here are the peak surge that we could be looking at. 1 to 2 feet from the mouth of the Rio Grande into Baffin Bay. 1 to 3 feet from Baffin Bay into Port Aransas. This includes Corpus Christi Bay. From Port Aransas to Port O'Connor, that's 2 to 4 feet. That includes Aransas Bay, as well as San Antonio Bay. And from Port O'Connor into San Luis Pass, this includes Matagorda Bay, 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. That's going to be the peak of the storm surge in terms of what we're going to be seeing here. And from San Luis Pass into Rutherford Beach, 2 to 4 feet. This includes Galveston Bay. And from Rutherford Beach into Intercoastal City, 1 to 3 feet. This includes Calcasieu Lake, as well as Sabine Lake, which is expected to see 1 to 3 feet of storm surge as well. And pretty much going on top of that, there is a slight risk in place for the system here. A slight risk, and that is mainly for the tornado threat here. This includes a population of around 907,000, but you do have a city that is well known, Galveston, in there. So it is something that we've been monitoring as well with this one. But other than that, that is pretty much what we're looking at in terms of Nicholas here. Going over to the key messages real quick. This is basically what the National Hurricane Center is saying about the storm. Heavy rainfall will impact portions of southeastern Texas, Louisiana, as well as southern Mississippi throughout the middle of the week. Significant rainfall amounts are possible, potentially resulting in areas of life-threatening flash and urban flooding, especially in highly urbanized metropolitan areas. Minor to isolated moderate river flooding is also expected, along with isolated major river flooding across smaller river basins in urban areas. So that's the first thing. So river flooding, be watching that, especially if you live near a river. The second point that they're making out is there is the danger of life-threatening storm surge inundation along the coast of Texas from Port Aransas to Sabine Pass. Residents in these areas should follow any advice given by local officials, and Nicholas is forecast to approach the middle Texas coast as a strong tropical storm this evening and could be near hurricane intensity at landfall. Tropical storm conditions are expected along portions of the middle and upper Texas coast this evening and tonight, with hurricane conditions possible from Fort Aransas to San Luis Pass. So that is pretty much everything we're looking at in terms of Nicholas. Of course, there's also the tropical storm force wind probabilities, which pretty much, of course, sharply cut off, although as you head much eastwards, there's still that little possibility that could be seeing some tropical storm force gusts. Only 10 to 20% though, so not exactly the highest of percentages, but still a chance nonetheless. So pretty much looping it back so you can see the progress of Nicholas over here. I can see how it's pretty much gotten itself, I'm not really sure if you could say organized considering it's been strengthening, but it's also been relocating its centers like crazy towards the north, which has definitely fast-forwarded its time up to landfall, so it's been quite the interesting day for Nicholas's evolution here. And really, it shouldn't surprise me considering the fact this is, of course, the second time we've seen the name used. And the first time that Nicholas was used, it was a pretty erratic storm out there in the open Atlantic. And here we are looking at a pretty erratic storm in the form of center relocation at this time. So it's definitely been quite the odd one, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Certainly has.
I've been looking at the Storm Prediction Center, and I looked at their mesoscale discussion 1740. Their summary, well, their discussion basically was that there are numerous cells with embedded mesocyte lobes that have been evident offshore, but it seems like the potential that this environment could event into immediate coast areas east of Palis. I don't know how to pronounce this. Palicos during the next few hours with a window opportunity for a supercell structure capable of producing a tornado or two. Otherwise, it appears that environmental conditions supportive of tornadoes will generally remain offshore through the overnight hours. While the sport has soundings for upper Texas coastal areas suggest that relatively stable boundary layer conditions will be maintained through daybreak.
And we're of course joined by Rishi now, which pretty much puts us back to our usual three that we seem to have with these. Rishi, what are your thoughts on this? Of course, you're joining us from Connecticut.
Yeah, it's been an interesting hurricane season. Nicholas is no exception. I've watched this system go through at least two center relocations. If memory serves me right, in the last 24 hours alone, and possibly a third even. So this definitely has made the storm an absolute nightmare to track. But it does look like it's finally more or less consolidated where it wants its center to be. It looks like it is kind of equidistant from Indianola and Palacios at this point. Maybe moving northeastwards just slightly with a jog toward Wadsworth. But apart from that, the storm generally just looks like a still relatively disorganized, but apparently it's strong enough to get a 70-mile-an-hour rating. So, you recon, glad you're in there.
Indeed, they've been definitely providing us with that valuable information. Of course, we've had some really interesting information, especially with that pressure drop that we saw. Between the fact that it went from 1,002 millibars down to 988 between a few recon passes there. So it's definitely been quite the storm to track in terms of the center relocation, trying to figure out what this thing has been doing, trying to figure out when this was going to be making landfall. Because it originally thought it wasn't going to be until late tonight. Now it's looking a lot sooner than what we initially expected here. So that has been something that we've been monitoring. And it's just heading on and about to become the 7th named storm to make landfall in the continental U.S. this year. The 10th to make landfall throughout the Atlantic as a whole. So we have seen a lot of names make landfall places across the Atlantic this year. And I think it's starting to become a bit tiresome for many of us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. So,
What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna give just a kind of like a no-brainer statistic here, but keep in mind we've only had 14 named storms. For 10 to have made landfall, I don't know if that's a record, but that's definitely a notable stat. Do the reduction of the fractions. 5 out of every 7 storms have made landfall this year, which is definitely something that I really have not seen in recent memory, anyway, apart from last year.
I mean, hopefully that ratio is slightly taken down a notch if the two things that we're watching don't do too much. Of course, it's still too early to say because of the fact that that we could still be seeing impacts from that western AOI that could impact the Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada yet again, and they don't need any more storms after we just dealt with Larry. And then, of course, with the Atlantic Invest 95L, that's still too early to say, but it does appear that it's not going to be threatening land the next 5 to 7 days at the very least. So that is good news in terms of that aspect. And while I am here, I might as well go through some of the models and just pretty much outline what we're going to be seeing in terms of everything the next week or two. So here, so we'll start off with the GFS 18Z. I can make out Nicholas over here. It doesn't have the low marker on it, but you can still kind of see it there. Pretty much expected to make landfall, curl eastwards, and pretty much dissipate. Now, I'm not sure what's going on. I believe they have the remnant moisture being pretty much absorbed into this Atlantic AY, which would apparently give it enough support for it to become a tropical cyclone off the Carolinas. This all while the 95L is getting itself together in the Atlantic here. But it doesn't appear that the area of interest is going to be long-lived, already having it completely elongated by hour 114. At least on the GFS. What's also interesting to note is the GFS develops a secondary thing at hour 114, apparently. Although it looks like it's a TD at best, but either way, it's interesting to note that there's now two tropical waves that the GFS is picking up on. So by hour 162, GFS is pretty much taking 95L into hurricane territories before weakening it somewhat, and strengthening it back again, and making it a major hurricane, because apparently we needed another one before it literally basically makes landfall the same exact place Larry did. So let's hope that doesn't happen. That would legit be a Larry repeat in the sense of impacts again. And that's not exactly something we want, considering that would take it just near Bermuda and then right over Newfoundland. So, of course, this is just one model run. We haven't been seeing this too consistent, so we can't make a forecast based off that. But it does appear that the GFS does want 3 named storms in the next week here. So we will be seeing what happens with that one.
I'm looking at the Euro, and it seems like around hour 120, it does recognize the system you're referring to off the Carolinas. The secondary system, it does not have it intensified to a hurricane. And it seems that, hold on, let me check track here. The track is quite different for the secondary wave that you're referring to. While ECM has this more northward, GFS has this, like, southeast, a good chunk more southeast. And the reason I suspect this is because I have caught on to the fact that GFS, this run is particularly portraying quite the weak ridge, so I could see maybe some of the tracking being different than what the other models are portraying at the moment. CMC also seems to portray that the ridge is decent. It's not strong, but it ain't weak, and it doesn't show the same track either.
Yeah, I was about to go over that one. I
Looking
could.
at icon.
Don't spoil the models. I'm going through all those.
Hey, okay, fine. I'll let you take the rest.
Yes, this is something that I always do. Anyways, pretty much going off the Canadian model, I can see it making landfall, at least on the Nicholas side of things. The short-lived storm forming off the Carolinas, as the National Hurricane Center indicates, is likely, although it goes a lot more eastward, it just pretty much trips it apart by elongation methods. and is much weaker with the systems that we're looking at for 95L and that wave behind it, but still showing some potential life for those both. As you go into Icon, they already make this a relatively decent storm. Looks like it makes it up to hurricane intensity, 988 millibars by hour 120, and you can kind of see the other thing that we're looking at, the other AOI there. Pretty much looking at the ensembles in general, this is pretty much what we're looking at. Of course, the red numbers here would denote the low pressure centers, or pretty much in the case of the storms that you see down here, the hurricanes, extratropical lows way up north, of course. And you can see Nicholas pretty much dissipating inland. You can start to see the signature coming on for the Invest there, 95L. This as some of the models begin to appear with that low that forms from that area of interest there. And it looks like there is some development that doesn't take place on the GEFS ensembles until it's around southeast of Long Island there. And then in terms of the Invest there's a lot of model support for it becoming a hurricane. And it's probably going to be quite long-lived. And then, of course, there's a lot of ensemble supporting the wave behind it as well. So this is going to be interesting to see if we get back-to-back storms here, at least coming off the coast there. But it does appear that in the end, 95L will probably be the longest-lasting system out of everything that we're watching in the Atlantic. Moving over to the Eastern Pacific, I'm going to run over this really quickly because I have one thing to say. It's dead, unless, of course, you're that weird thing, that person that trusts hour 384 and a random 962 millibar low in the Eastern Pacific. Pretty much, I think it's safe to say that the Eastern Pacific is going to be quiet for the time being. In the Western Pacific, we can skim over that a little bit. You can see what we're talking about. Chanthu continuing to stall a little bit longer here. And while this occurs, we're going to be seeing a new low try to get itself established east of the Philippines here. And that might be something to watch, as there are more models starting to develop this. Although there is still some uncertainty as to when this is going to be making landfall, of course. But in the next 5 days, we could be seeing a moderate to upper end tropical storm impacting the central Philippines. Afterwards, it is expected to go into the South China Sea, where further intensification could happen. So we have it at 10% chance right now, but as long as these trends continue, those chances will be going up. So that is something that we're going to be having to monitor here, and it looks like the ensembles keep something in the South China Sea at all times for whatever reason, so that is something. And last but not least, we'll go into the North Indian Ocean, because there's no point looking at the Central Pacific with there being absolutely nothing and nothing expected in the next eons there. And pretty much it's gone. There is, the only ensemble support is something at hour 384, and we know not to trust that kind of stuff, so that is pretty much what we're looking at. And of course, the latest recon appears to be flying to the east now, so that is pretty much the big old rundown of the models.
I also have one additional model that was not covered here, Arpege, and it's showing nothing. So,
Well,
yeah.
thank you for preventing us from seeing nothing then.
Well, I mean, it probably will show something, but it's only up to hour 114, and 18Z run hasn't fully loaded up to that point yet.
Alrighty then. Let's see here. I'm gonna see if I can do this right so I can pull up the radar Rishi has. We're also joined recently by Isaac. Of course, Isaac has been in the path of this. Isaac, how have you been handling this so far?
Oh, just taking it easy, staying indoors. Winds here so far haven't really gotten above around 45 miles an hour or so, which is usually what we would see here during a strong cold front. So, fortunately, not too bad here, but the same cannot be said for areas around Matagorda, Texas, which are getting slammed by high-end tropical storm force sustained winds and up to Category 1 force wind gusts at this point in time, unfortunately.
Yeah, not good news. Thankfully, you're all right, but unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the areas east of it. We've always knew that this was going to be the case, that the eastern end of the tropical storm would be the one that would be producing much of the wind and the rain associated with this.
And I've been looking at a few observation areas nearby, and the Palacios Airport has recorded a wind gust up to 62 miles an hour, with sustained winds clocking 51 miles an hour so far. And they're going to be getting into the thick of things here soon if the storm doesn't stop going on its right-handed trend here past 3 hours on radar. And also a buoy near Matagorda recorded a peak wind gust of 79 miles an hour few minutes back. So certainly a strong tropical storm at the very, very least here.
Yep, indeed. Rishi, you have the radar on your end pulled up. What are you showing us at the moment? What have you been seeing based off the latest radar trends?
So it's kind of a mixed bag here. It's kind of a mixed bag. The reason I say that is so if we look kind of at the beginning of the radar loop here. So this is at 7:54 Eastern Daylight. So this would probably be this would be 6:54 p.m. Central. If we look here, we have very nicely well defined banding structures here. So it's pretty obvious that the center is probably going to be in this location. But if we start to skip ahead a bit, you'll notice that there's kind of this surge to the east here on the reflectivity, which then starts to wrap around again. So it looks as though the LLC uh, is still a little ragged. It's definitely much better to find than it was earlier today, but it looks like the LLC is more or less taking a if you smooth out the motion anyway, it looks like it's still kind of trying to parallel the coast. Um, so it doesn't look like it's in any hurry to make that beeline into the coastline, which is both you know, both well, really mostly bad news because the longer it's over water, the more time it has to strengthen. So, so if it decides to take a northward jog, kind of towards the Wadsworth, Sweeney, Freeport area, that would give it the shortest amount of time to strengthen and obviously until landfall. But if it takes a more northeasterly or even east northeasterly coast, we could see it trying to make landfall anywhere over here, which is toward the Boulevard Peninsula, and even up towards Galveston. So it all depends on what this center is trying to do, because it's very hard to tell exactly where it is with the lack of precipitation around it. But in general, at least in general, I could say the motion is kind of toward the northeast. Just a matter of exactly how far to the northeast it's actually going. It's still very hard to tell.
I also want to comment here on this system. I was looking at a close loop. It looks like there is some very good news for everybody because it is getting extremely sheared to the southwest, and it's barely it's barely making ends meet with the convection. So I don't expect this to be intensifying much more at all, especially with the amount of shear it's receiving right now. It could even force it to landfall faster and kill it even sooner. So
One thing I have noticed though has been more frequent lightning strikes in the, I guess you could call it now, eye wall of this. And the same has been said from some spotters on the ground are reporting frequent lightning flashes and the strongest winds of this storm here. So that usually means it's at the bare minimum trying to maintain its intensity, and it also could mean it's trying to maybe perhaps slightly strengthen even further before making a landfall here. Um, so that's really, really concerning trends with this. The storm really has been, at least to me, a really massive headache for I think everybody involved. It's had what now? I think three center reformations at this point, and this is its third one. and this seems to be the most dominant one it's ever had, seeing that it's near hurricane strength right now. And on your screen, this is a satellite loop from Go 16. This is a 5-minute imagery loop. So you're seeing one frame in this satellite loop is 5 minutes that have passed, and you can see how it's really been trying to rotate convection around the sensor there. And in the last 2 frames, it's getting pretty close to doing so. So, like what Rushi said earlier, if it really decides to go to that more eastern trajectory that it's been showing on radar the past 3 hours, it's going to be concerning to see what the storm tries to do here, given the fact that it could have potentially more time of water if that trend ends up actually coming to fruition.
Yeah, it'd definitely be concerning to watch for sure, just because of the fact that it may not be going up to hurricane intensity does not make this any less threatening here. You can see on radar just the amount of rain that we're going to be seeing going inland. Much of the heavy rain is yet to come for fully ashore yet, so we still got quite a bit of time before all of that comes in. But we've now hit the half-hour mark, which is typically the time on a normal day in which we get people to send us questions for us to answer. So if you do have any questions for us, please send us a question, a comment, concern, anything. Just be sure to tag us at Force13. That will pop up our name in orange, and that will allow us to see your, anything that you send us. So that is something that we're going to be doing in the next 30 minutes. Let's see here. We'll try to go back with the ones that we had before, at least. Is Baba 3 a nickname? The name list calls for it to be named Gulab. No. Baba 3 means Bay of Bengal 03. That means that's the 3rd depression to be in the Bay of Bengal this year. It has to attain tropical storm force wind officially, at least to an extent, before it actually does get a name. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center did not classify this as a system. Otherwise, it would have been 3B. And pretty much that's how it went there. Someone did criticize someone's comment about saying only 14 named storms because 14 is the average. So, yeah, we're already at 14 storms, which I guess sounds like an only thing because of the fact that last year we already had, 18 or 19 by now? So, I mean, I can see why we might think that. What are the chances of Nicholas bumping up to 75 miles an hour at the 11 p.m. update because of the pressure and convection blowups? Could it be like Gamma with the last-minute intensification? Well, to be fair, Gamma was rapidly intensifying at the end.
And this storm certainly is trying its best to do so. So it's certainly within the realm of possibility. I'm not gonna fully discount it. That's why they've had these hurricane watches in effect for the past few hours here. Is due to the fact that of the uncertainty from this systems in terms of the uncertainty of this storm's intensification, and unfortunately we're seeing right in front of us what appears to be at least maintaining Tropical Storm Nicholas very, very close to reaching Category 1 intensity. So yeah, just to answer your question, it's certainly within the realm of possibility, but we'll see if Nicholas does it or not.
Indeed. The next question that we had, that was pretty much the same exact question that we had. Could 95L be destroyed by a tut north of the Lesser Antilles?
Let me take a look at that right now. So when do we expect 95L to develop?
The next 5 days, of course.
So 120 hours, got that. So at that time, 95L would be... It would be a few hundred miles east of the Lesser Antilles, right?
Probably, or still east of it, I think.
Well, there is nothing that indicates that this tut would destroy a system. And it doesn't even look like a strong tut whatsoever. It just looks like a basic upper-level anticyclone to me.
Well, I guess that answered the question then. Let's see here. 2 earthquakes hit more land than tornadoes. I'm pretty sure we answered this last night, but obviously since there's a lot more of them to happen, and they occur on fault lines. What's up with the cyclone that the CMC marks with the pressure of 963 forming by Greenland in 222 hours? Well, I think that's... What?
That is an extratropical cyclone, most likely. and I don't. I have no comment on that because, yeah, CMC isn't exactly the most reliable model, but it's definitely more reliable than the GFS for long range or mid long range here. But it, yeah, I have no comment. I'd have to see it when it happens.
Oh yeah, no, it's just a giant extratropical low. I think they're pretty much talking about the size because it's a massive one.
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah, nothing that would be an actual tropical cyclone, of course. Could the AOI north of Hispaniola go up north and do some impacts to New Jersey?
Well, that kind of like that question leaves a lot of questions already. Are we talking like hour 192, hour 168, 216? How far out?
I haven't seen anything about that hitting Texas, and there's not even an AOI north of Hispaniola, unless you're talking about the Bahamas AOI, and that's supposed to not really hit land at all.
If he's referring to he or she is referring to the North Carolina AOI, I'm looking at the EPS right now. It seems like ridging patterns absolutely do not support tropical cyclones slamming into New York or anything in the Northeast for that matter. It seems it would get steered along east northeast away from the U.S. coastline.
Yeah. Yeah,
All I know is that the east and northeast do not need another tropical cyclone.
Yeah, we're kind of rained out over here.
Yeah.
We had Henri, then Ida's remnants came and really messed things up. So if we get another tropical cyclone in any capacity up here this year, I'm going to be personally attacked by this hurricane season. With that being said, is it possible? I mean, there's always a non-zero chance, but will it happen? I don't think that it's too likely, at least going off what everybody else is saying.
Yeah.
I'm looking at GFS right now, just to check. So, this is the most westward model basically we have because of the wheat ridge bias. And the scenario it portrays, even the GFS doesn't really have this directly hit New York or any of the states, but rather just like love taps it or slides right past it near miss. So yeah, take that as you would.
Alright, hey. Moving onwards. Let's see here. I got chat kind of slowing down. Okay, turns out we have a lot more questions than I thought. How big is Tropical Storm Nicholas before it hits Texas?
It is. If I had to give like a scale 1 to 10, I'd say maybe it's a 4 in size. It's certainly not what I call medium-sized. It's one of the smaller storms I've seen.
National Hurricane Center has the tropical storm force winds radius, with the tropical storm force winds extending out 115 miles or 185 kilometers from the center as of their latest intermediate update.
So that's a small system. Yeah, I personally put this on the higher end of a small system, but that's just me.
Getting reports of parts of Matagorda Bay are without power, and they're estimating wind gusts reaching the 70s in the mile an hour range. So we continuing to decline in the conditions down there over in Matagorda.
Yep, indeed. Trying to get through some of the questions a little bit quicker with the amount of than we have. Let's see here. How Nicholas affect Alabama, if at all? The remnants will enter the state, so rain is likely there. What are the chances of Nicholas becoming a hurricane? Pretty low, but not zero. Any chance of hurricane force winds in Houston? No. Is a La Nina building up in October, November? La Nina is building up. When will Iona form? Well, first we have to get through Hone. Is it true that... Okay, nice question. Is it true that Geico could save you 15% or more on car insurance? Also, when do you expect Nicholas to make landfall? We'll answer the last question because that's the one that actually pertains to everything we're talking about. But if the current northeastward trend holds, it's probably going to be in about, what, 3 or 4 hours?
It was forecast to make landfall, if I'm not mistaken, originally around like 1 in the morning. But if it goes more east and north, as has been noted in the last few radar frames, that could be widened out, so it could be making landfall a little bit later than forecast if it stays over water. We'll just have to see again if this is a continuing trend or if it's just a short-term trend in the storm's forward movement.
I'd say, although I'm not, this isn't 100% certainty here, but I'm looking at Icon right now. It's portraying landfall. I'd say maybe 8 a.m. would be one of the latest times you would get. 8 a.m. tomorrow for a landfall possibility. Not much later than that. Worst case scenario, if it just starts center relocating all over again.
Yeah, 8 a.m. is definitely going to be the absolute, excuse me, the absolute latest time that landfall could occur. I mean, it could make landfall pretty much anywhere within the next 12 hours, but I personally think the best chance for landfall is going to be within the next 6 hours. So,
Flashes just recorded a wind gust of 76 miles an hour with sustained winds of 55 miles an hour. So that's up from 63 miles an hour the last update 2 minutes ago or so.
Yeah, not good news. Winds are definitely going to be on the rise there as we head into the next hour or so. Let's see here. Could 95L become Odette in the next few days? I would not suggest renaming. But of course the next name in the Atlantic is Odette for whatever it does for him next. Can you save big money at Menards? That's a completely off-topic question. Random question, but what was the most recent example of the brown ocean effect? I think that would have to be, what, Elsa?
probably, I think.
Yeah, pretty sure it was Elsa.
So just before you get to the next question, just because I want to get it out there, the recon is beginning their next pass into the storm, so we should be getting data from that probably in the next I'm willing to bet about 25-30 minutes.
Wonderful. Let's see here. Do you think 95L will become the next major hurricane? I mean, there are models that want that to happen, but it's a little bit too early to say anything about the intensity of it. I would pretty much say that upper end tropical storm is definitely likely with this one, as long as nothing stupid happens in the next several days. Let's see here. Oh, there we are. Okay, is Nicholas analogous to Hurricane Umberto of 2007?
Now that one intensified way faster than this one. That one went from barely even a disturbance to a Category 1 in roughly around 12 hours. High-end Category 1 nonetheless in around 12 hours. And this is a different scenario, to say the least. Humberto didn't have, if I recall, Humberto didn't have 3 center relocations like Nicholas just did.
So I guess the answer to that question would be straightforward, nothing. Let's see here. Is Nicholas lactose intolerant? I have no idea what you mean by that, but okay. I have to say I've been watching you guys for years, but this has to be the best stream. Well, thank you. I know Nathan hasn't been here with most of the live truck weather bulletins lately, but I do appreciate the comments. Of course, we are always trying to be better. What kind of weather can Houston experience? Well, definitely some heavy rainfall. That's going to be the primary threat with this one. 4 to 6 inches of rain, possibly a little bit higher. Thankfully, it looks like the rainfall totals have been going down slightly in terms of what is forecast, but regardless, it's still heavy rain, and we all know Houston has been hit with several tropical cyclones hard over the last few years in terms of how much rainfall they received. Take Harvey, take Imelda, 2019, for example. Just some examples of Houston just getting hit severely with storms.
77-mile-an-hour wind gusts now reported in Palacios Airport. Recorded in Palacios Airport, I should say.
Yeah. Alright, in the East Pacific, is Rec never going to give you up? Also, when is Nicholas expected to become extratropical? Oh no, Nicholas isn't becoming extratropical, it's becoming a remnant low. Basically, it's going to be too far south to really turn extratropical. Is it possible for 95L to track more west than northwest? So I guess it would pretty much become a land threat as a result. Again, I think it's way too early because like impacts that would cause it from going to westwards would be over a week out. So I think it's a little too early to say like the overall trek of this because it's gonna be a lot of changes that we could be seeing. So we'll see what happens. Is that an eye forming on IR?
I was actually just about to bring up an eye feature because it looks, at least in reflectivity, that it's trying to do something with a semicircular region, and it lines up quite nicely with where the center looked to be going. So it might be trying once again, but it has a history of doing this where it tries to get an eye wall together, but then something happens and that structure completely falls apart. So we might see it happen, but given the history of the storm so far, I don't see the possibility being, or the probability rather, being too high just yet.
Also, on top of this, Mick pointed out in the North Atlantic chat, very good point. The tilt of the storm also is rather, how do I word this? He showed this image of like the tilt of the system, and there were like multiple curvatures in on the reflectivity, so it may be harder to determine if that's an actual eye or not.
Well, I guess, yeah, this storm's been confusing, so it's definitely not surprising to see that it's becoming even more confusing as we get into those hours before landfall. Um, let's see here. I am sorry for my cat. Looking at radar, the northern island was getting stronger. Could this be a hurricane now?
Again, I don't think it's an eye wall. It definitely looks like it definitely looks like an intense band that's close to the center, but I don't think it's really a bona fide eye at this point. If it is, then Recon, when they make their pass, we'll get the latest on that. Recon, I believe, is currently somewhere in this area of the storm, possibly a little further toward the center. Uh, but but regardless, they're going to tell us whether or not they find a legitimate eye. They'll let us know if they find winds supportive of a hurricane or not. Either way, we just have to wait and see.
Hang on a minute, Rishi. I'm looking at this reflectivity. Are you noticing the banding to the south-southwest?
The south southwest.
It's
Uh,
weak, but it's there. Reflectivity.
a little bit.
Is
It's
that possibly LLC and MLC on alignment?
if it is, then that's a good sign for
I did
I say a
notice.
good sign for us humans on the ground. Not That's not a good sign for Nicholas as a system. It's
Yeah, I did.
if those centers are misaligned, then it's not going to be able to strengthen too much further. If it turns out that they actually are still in alignment, and that's just a random artifact or something, then obviously then we have a little bit more to worry about.
I don't think that's an artifact necessarily. It looks consistent from what I've seen. Looks like the low level circulation.
See if I'm understanding you correctly, it'd be this banding kind of over here.
And then you can
Um,
see, sort of near the big blob of artifacts in gunk, you see like this outflow looking banding to the west.
just taking a look on a different radar here, just in case it shows something that we can't see from Corpus Christi. 1 second.
Let's see here. Oh,
Um,
there might be something, like there's something firing near Port Lavaca.
yeah, I can't make a definitive statement on what this storm is doing at this exact moment. I mean it definitely looks as though it is still at least maintaining strength. Whether or not it's strengthening at this moment, I can't tell. But recon should be able to give us a very good idea as to what's actually happening inside the storm.
I'm going to check some imagery, see if maybe I can figure this out. By the way, how are you getting radar scope on your PC?
You can just buy it from the Windows Store. But anyway,
Oh.
so where I've circled is kind of the general areas to where the recon flight currently is. They appear to be traveling in about this direction, so that kind of lends evidence to the center to an estimated center location of somewhere in this area, potentially even out to here. Um, so assuming that's the case, then if the low level center is somewhere over here, then Recon's gonna find it, um, which does line up quite nicely with what we've been seeing in reflectivity. But only time will tell whether or not that's an MLC or LLC misalignment, or if that's the actual low level center getting pulled underneath a deeper convection burst, which will enable it to actually spin up a little bit faster. We'll have to wait and see on what the recon plane finds.
Although, given how there's like 30 knots of southwesterly shear, I'm not sure if it'll be able to be aligned for this much longer.
We're getting towards the end of this, so trying to get some more questions answered here, since we still have quite a bit. Let's see here. Looking at our, wait, that was the one we left off of. Is it possible for? Oh, we are okay. We already answered the last question. What is happening with the center relocation? Does that mean it's going to make landfall earlier than expected?
Well, if it's going more northeast, then it'll probably get a little bit more time over water than last time, unless it goes more north than east, or if it goes due north. The more north it goes, the less time it has. The more east it goes, the more time it has, in general speaking.
Yeah. Let's see here. Is there a low pressure near Tropical Storm Nicholas? What?
Well, seeing as how Nicholas is the low pressure system, by default the answer is yes.
Yeah, I guess so. Let's see here. How strong does Nicholas become before landfall? We're pretty much sticking with 70 miles an hour. Still no chance it does get up to 75, which would make it a hurricane. But as of right now, it's still up for debate. And I think there are people who think this would be the ugliest hurricane if it were to become a hurricane. Since Barry, at least.
Barry, yeah, I was about to say Barry wants to talk to you, but you mentioned since Barry, so you are forgiven.
You're safe.
Yeah, we'll make sure it works everything properly.
Recon still heading on. It's going to be really interesting to see what they find. If it's, of course, still maintaining its intensity or if it's continuing to try to intensify.
It seems that we've been joined by a Christian in the last few minutes. Christian, you're joining us from over the opposite end of the Atlantic. What are your thoughts of this?
Well, like I said, I believe it was last night, this is a very dangerous situation. I'm not sure if this has been updated, but since I did my update on Nicholas today, it was a CDPS 4.
It's still
I'm not sure
CDPS
if
4.
yeah, I'm not sure if this system's made landfall yet.
It has not.
It has not. It will do in the coming hours, I believe. But, I'm not sure if that's true either, but um, I'll let you decide on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was saying it's like it's getting there. It's up to 70 miles an hour.
Yeesh, it's not far off of a you know what? Again, my Bluetooth earbuds just decided to disconnect. Hang on one moment. I do apologize.
So it does appear that at least the low-level center was getting pulled, just south of northeast, kind of east northeast. But in recent frames, it looks like it's trying to make a northward jog again. So I don't know. I honestly don't know what what the center is doing. It's still doing some very strange things.
I think, in my opinion, I think what might be happening is that this deeper convection is really trying its hardest to wrap around it, but that shear is just saying no. And I think we're seeing it trying to decouple again here.
Exactly. The shear factor may have been favorable for a little bit, but its time's running out, and now the shear factor has become unfavorable.
Yeah, we've been really fortunate that this has been sheared a lot, and its development has really been gradual till about now. Had it had more time and better conditions over water, we could have been looking at a completely different scenario than we're looking at right now. But I guess on a lesser side of things, we're dealing with a high-end tropical storm, maybe possibly low-grade hurricane here, and not anything stronger than that. Not to say high-end tropical storm or low-end Cat 1 is, by far not dangerous. They're very, very dangerous systems, and you got to take them seriously, especially ones that are kind of not really making up their mind here and maybe trying to get more time over open water here, going off the latest radar trends. But we'll see about that. And as we've been saying, the next reconnaissance pass is going to be pretty crucial here to see whether or not it's continuing its intensification, or if it's halted it, or if it's even weakened now since the last pass.
Well, speaking of, it looks like they are just starting their center encounter. They are not in the center yet. They're still encountering a few gusts, or at least some modest winds. It looks to be about 15 knots where they were at the last data point. But the pressure there appears to be 993.7. So maybe it has its center pressure has risen a little bit, but it's still too early to tell because that's not the actual center pass yet. However, I do also want to point out that in the last data set, they have an unflagged SFMR reading of 72.5 miles an hour. So it's not out of. I guess it's a bit more likely than I initially thought that it could get to a hurricane strength. It's not. If it does, it's only going to be minimal at best, but even still, the chances are low.
But yeah, those in the path of this system need to have their preparations complete by now.
Yep, we're pretty much run out of time, so at this point, the best I can say is if you are in the threat of this, if you're getting the rainfall right now, please make sure you have your flood safety plans in place. Please make sure you are already and set to go if you are in those areas with storm surge likely, because of course we are expected to be seeing 3 to 5 feet of that. And needless to say, you really want to be making sure that those plans are ready. It's not going to be the strongest storm that you have to deal with, of course. We've had stronger, but regardless, this is one of the more prolific rain events that we've seen from tropical systems just because of the slow movement that we're going to be seeing. So needless to say, please make sure that you are taking the necessary precautions. But covering the ending of the stream was Isaac, Rishi, Christian, Samuel. I'm presenting here tonight, Xavier Burns. Thank you guys for coming, and thank you to the viewers as well for watching us. We do hope that we gave you the necessary information that you guys needed. So with that, that takes us to the on this day. On this day in 2014, I forgot to change the image, whoops. But Hurricane Odile was a Category 4 that was going to be causing some very significant impacts across the Baja Peninsula as well as portions of Mexico as well. There was also Calmegi, which was about to make a landfall on the Philippines, and Edward, which would become the first major of the inactive 2014 Atlantic hurricane season. Odile definitely takes the notability points and will later get retired the following year. Of course, this is followed by, or sponsored by Cyclone History. You can find their Twitter on the graphic or bottom bar below. So with that, the next name in the Atlantic is Odette, followed by Peter. In the Eastern Pacific, we're looking out for Pamela and Rick. And in the Central Pacific, that basin is stuck waving because of its inability to spin up Hone. In the Western Pacific, the next name is Dianmu, followed by Mindul. And in the North Indian Ocean, we're still looking out for Gulab and Shaheen. Moving on over to the Southern Hemisphere, specifically the Southwestern Indian Ocean. The next name here is Anna, followed by Batsire. In the Australian region, we're looking out for Patty and Ruby. And in the South Pacific, it's Cody. We'll be back for another Tropical Weather Bulletin tomorrow night.